At last. It's the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Unfiltered. It is raining outside if you hear noise as I'm recording, so we're going straight back to the Idaho 4Ks. And I wanted to react to that video of Bryan Kohberger going into that, I think it's a Costco, but I'm going to leave a link to the video in the description. So go over to Outcast channel and give them a like. I'm not going to react. I only have one question on that, and that is, how did they know to zoom in on Bryan Kohberger before he even became a suspect? To me, that's just very weird. But in today's video, for those of you who have been following this case, you'll know about Ray, who is an expert in his field. So we're going to be talking about the phone pings. We'll also go through Bryan Kohberger's alibi that they talk about, and we're going to be talking mostly about the lies that were fabricated in putting together this probable cause affidavit. So let's go to the 13th of November on the late night, early morning in question. So Bryan Kohberger was out driving in the early morning hours of the 13th of November 2022, which is something he often did. What he would do is he would take his car out to a location, and from there he would go and hike, or he would take a late night run, or go and look at the night sky. It said that he drove throughout the area that was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho. And this included Wawaii Park, which, by the way, was a favorite location of Bryan's. So when his phone was analyzed by the Cellbrite experts, they uncovered a whole lot of late night photos that Bryan had taken in the weeks prior to the unalivings. So timestamps do show a pattern of Bryan Kohberger being out late at night, which again to me is not really unusual. And Cellbrite confirmed that these were in fact the original photos that were taken with Bryan's phone camera. So meaning these photos weren't downloaded, they weren't altered, and they said that the GPS metadata embedded in them could pinpoint where Bryan was and where exactly these images were taken. And something I find very interesting is, if you think back to the stories that are still going on about the stalking, Bryan Kohberger stalking these victims, this is very strange because they didn't uncover any images, not of the victims, not of their houses, not of anything related to them. There's not a single image to verify the supposed online stalking situation. I know I am going off track a bit here, but if you think of stalkers, they do tend to document their targets in some way or another. I mean, they'll collect photos or videos or anything that would remind them of the person that they are watching. So the defense planned to present evidence that would suggest that on the night of the 13th of November 2022, Bryan Kohberger's phone was located south of Pullman, Washington, which was not near the Pullman Highway. And this means that his phone could not have been in the vehicle that was captured on surveillance video near Floyd's cannabis shop. So according to the probable cause affidavit, Bryan Kohberger's phone was at his home at around 2:42 a.m., then at 2:47 a.m. It was detected driving through Pullman, Washington, and right after that, the phone stopped reporting to the network completely, and it didn't come back online again until 4:48 a.m. when it pinged near Blaine, Idaho, close to US Highway 95. And just a few minutes later, it showed up near Tensed, then Uniontown, and finally back in Pullman between 5:25 and 5:27 a.m. So I want you to keep those times in mind, but basically there is a gap in the phone data during that time window. The closest that investigators could place the phone to the crime scene was about 10 miles away near Blaine, Idaho, which was at 4:48 a.m. when it supposedly came back on. So the PCA states that Bryan Kohberger's phone went quiet from 2:47 to 4:48 a.m. And the prosecution said that this shows that he was actually trying to hide his location during the times of the unalivings. So they're basically using a lack of evidence as actual evidence. And the thing is, the phone records, well, they don't show him going to Moscow on that night at all. It's very much, to me, a case of absence of evidence being used or treated like actual proof. Now, the state theory was that Bryan turned his phone off or he put it in airplane mode. But I'm going to prove to you that he didn't do that at all. Now, in the days leading up to the unalivings, the phone did ping near 1122 King Road multiple times, at least a dozen, as they say. And after that, the phone pinged all along the route back to Pullman, Washington, which, if you think about it, I mean, it does sound very damning, but you also have to take into account something else, and that is the surveillance footage of that white Hyundai Elantra. And the thing is that it roughly matches, but it doesn't quite match. You see, some phone pings occur well before or well after that Elantra is seen on camera. And I'm referring to it as that Elantra because I know that it was not Bryan Kohberger's car. That's for another day. Now, the ping that happened at 9:12 a.m. the following morning, the one the media has made a meal out of the fact that Bryan Kohberger went back to admire his handiwork. And they say that this is exactly why his phone pinged there the following morning. It doesn't place him at the crime scene. There's a lot of speculation going on here. But think about it. If he was in the vicinity the next morning, do you for 1 minute think that Bryan Kohberger would actually go and sit there with knowing the exact time that these two girls were going to call? I mean, there was nothing to see before the 911 call was made. So did he know exactly what time? What was he admiring at 9:12 a.m. when there was supposedly nothing happening at the scene? I don't know. Now, if you think the media is bad, it gets even more slimy. The very people who put together the probable cause affidavit were Ashley Jennings, Detective Maury, Brett Payne, and that funny little fucker with a white beard. Oh, prosecuting attorney Bill Thompson. So they were basically pushing this case so hard just to get an arrest. And I mean, Ashley Jennings is pretty much known for being very meticulous in court. And she was a big player when the defense said that law enforcement actually misled the magistrate to get these search warrants. And she defended the affidavit 100%, saying, well, we did what needed to be done. I mean, what does that mean? Does that include lying through your teeth just to get an arrest? So the Idaho Statesman spoke with a telecommunications expert named Ben Leviton about these cell towers. And they wanted to know if there was any connection between the home and what happened that night and Bryan's cell phone activity. And Leviton said that it's impossible to know for sure whether Bryan actually turned his phone off unless there was somebody that had tried to call him during those 2 hours. So when law enforcement said that his phone went dark, it doesn't automatically prove that Bryan shut the phone off. I mean, there's a number of things that could have happened. He could have lost signal, the phone could have died, or just stopped communicating with the network. So the very best the state had was to say that Bryan's phone was in a 27 square mile area, Now, in our calculation, that's 70 square kilometers. So basically, if you drive from one square to the other, it would be 8.4 kilometers. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but according to my calculations, it is about a 10-minute drive, which is quite far. So Leviton provided them with a map of the cell towers in the area, and the thing is, there were only 2 towers, which means if Bryan was driving south of Pullman and west of Moscow, his phone could have easily connected to the same tower that services the King Road residence. And that doesn't really tell us anything other than the fact that he didn't use his phone during that time. It really doesn't prove that he was anywhere near the home or at the home. I mean, for all we know, he could have been out at Hawaii Park, which was one of his favorite locations to go to. And this is the thing. The media has run wild with the story that Bryan's alibi was that he was out stargazing. And they claim that he couldn't possibly have seen the moon and the stars on that night because it was very cloudy. But what you guys have to remember is that this was never ever Bryan Kohberger's alibi. I know that a lot of people struggle with this. I mean, it almost feels to me when you tell people about it like they were hit over the head. They refuse to entertain anything else. And I get that because unfortunately for Bryan, he was driving out all by himself. And when you're on your own like that and you have nobody who can verify where you went, you don't have anybody that can confirm your whereabouts, it is a bit kakas. But anyway, let's say the surveillance footage of that Hyundai and the phone data had aligned perfectly. Well, yes, then there would definitely be something concrete to go on. But the thing is, the footage isn't moving in a way that matches the phone pings, and that is where we are going to bring in Cy. Now, Cy has so much experience in cell phone data analysis. I mean, he founded his own corporation, he's worked with the feds, and he's so credible that they call him when they need an expert. Now, normally, Cy would serve as an expert witness for the prosecution. But in this specific case, he was actually working with the defense team for Bryan Kohberger. And after he reviewed all of this data, he said that the prosecution's findings didn't line up with his own analysis. Defense team Kohberger.
From what I have reviewed, the FBI mapped 6% of the data that came in. Mallory's testimony and what I've seen through here, he was up to about 18%. So by either standard, more than 80% on both accounts were never mapped or accounted for. And I'm not talking overall from every single day for 6 months. I'm talking about the time frames that are chosen. So for example, this time period that's represented here is where I'm getting the 18%.
And that's the 48 hours?
This is specifically from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. on the morning of the 13th, arguably the most critical time period of this entire investigation. They mapped a handful of connections. When I say a handful, they mapped 18%. When you add the other 82%, it tells a much more detailed story.
So here you have an expert saying that the prosecution is wrong. He said that law enforcement knew about the data, but that they didn't request or disclose it properly. And they later said that AT&T doesn't keep it. And that's why I said that Ashley Jennings lied about not being able to get the AT&T data. She said that it wasn't available at the time. The thing is, these guys wanted to rely on all the phone pings. And this is something that Cy criticized a lot. He said that they relied too heavily on the pings, which are not always very reliable, especially when you're only looking at 1 or 2 towers. He also pointed out that while the prosecution pulled over 3,800 timing advance records from AT&T, between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. on the 13th of November 2022, they didn't run the very same check for Bryan Kohberger's phone. Now, when they did run his phone, which was separately, it came back with absolutely nothing. And this said that Bryan was nowhere. But the question is, why did law enforcement lie about all of these things? Special Agent Nick Balance, I hope I'm saying that right, who was also working on the case, and he was also stationed at the Moscow Police Department. Well, he wasn't only an investigator, but he was also a lead expert, and that raised a lot of questions about conflicts of interest. But Cyril said that Agent Balance provided very vague and incomplete explanations about how he determined Bryan Kohberger's phone location, and that he also failed to disclose the timing advance information. So basically, Cyril was saying that Balance's analysis relied on very selective or limited cell data, leaving out records that would have shown that the phone was not near the crime scene at the time that prosecutors said it was. So Cyril decided to drop an affidavit where he accused the prosecution of misleading the courts as well as the defense. Basically, he's saying outright that they are lying when it comes to the AT&T reports. And I mean, there's no way that he would have put out this affidavit if he couldn't back it up. So I just want to read the last part of the affidavit. It says, "In my nearly 30 years of working with or for prosecutors all over the United States, I have never witnessed such a deliberate attempt by prosecutors to mislead the court on evidence in such plain sight. Anyone making such a claim would have to believe the court is incapable of reviewing the physical evidence in possession of the state and defense. It rises to a level beyond simple miscommunication or oversight and is clear and intentional misrepresentation in the hopes to conceal a much larger issue. I respectfully request the court gives this affidavit the due attention it deserves and explore these issues further." According to Cyril, Bryan Kohberger wasn't even in the state at the time. But I mean, how is that for an affidavit? Something else we need to keep in mind is that Bryan's phone wasn't seized until the 30th of December, which was almost 7 weeks after the crime took place. And that's quite a long time. So during that period, a lot of this temporary data or network logs could have disappeared. Then, if you talk about the chain of custody, well, multiple people handled this device even before it was formally inspected. And that opens the door for a lot of mistakes, like duplicates being created, timestamps, shifting, gaps appearing in the data. It also seems very unusual to me that the Barnards talked about their work so publicly, even before the trial was supposed to start, because typically forensic experts keep quiet until it's time to actually go and testify. And then you have the phone itself. I mean, when a phone is used normally, like opening apps, sending messages, browsing, using maps, what the phone does is it constantly creates new data which can overwrite old files on the phone. There's all these system updates, reboots, and you know, phones automatically try to free up storage, and this will delete any old records. I know my phone does this all the time. It constantly tells me that my storage is full, or to free up space, or it overwrites files, and this makes it very difficult to know exactly where the phone was or whether it was really turned off at certain times. I mean, if somebody like Cyril, who has decades of experience with prosecutors and law enforcement, says that there's been a deliberate attempt to mislead the court well, then you have to take that very seriously. The people that put together this PCA, well, to me, they should have been fired from their jobs for lying, amongst other things. And it just makes me wonder, why would they risk their career? I mean, it's been said that there was a lot of pressure to make a very fast arrest, but it wasn't so fast. So what other motivation could they have? I mean, was law enforcement getting money to keep the flow of narcotics going in Idaho? It doesn't seem far-fetched. We know there's a lot of lawless neighborhoods that are crawling with crime, illegal substances. And when you start looking at the people who are supposed to be stopping this kind of thing, it starts to raise a lot of red flags. I think by bringing in these phone pings, it was a very strategic move. It's almost like the phone data gave them a way to say, look, Bryan Kohberger's phone's right at the house, which you know it wasn't. I mean, law enforcement, they had no weapon, no eyewitness, no blood evidence, and so they were desperately trying to lean on these digital breadcrumbs. Now, if you'd like me to dig a little bit deeper, I can do that. I'm no cell phone expert, so if any of you in the comments can give some advice or input into it. I didn't want to make this video too technical. Like I say, I'm not a phone expert. But thanks for sticking around with me. Please go check out my shorts. I leave all the bloopers in there. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a comment, hit the like button, and please consider subscribing to my channel. So until next time, I will see you guys in the next video.